Well, I guess we should do you want to do the introduction?
Yeah, let me just, again, this is July the 17th, 2009. It's Friday afternoon. There was a well-known author named Mitch Albom who wrote a series of one book who became a bestseller in a movie called Tuesdays with Maury. And so Carrie Daniels and I have made this Fridays with Jim. So we've enjoyed very, very much these Fridays, so much so that we're not even calling anymore. We're just coming and knocking.
There you go.
And he comes and brings us in. So I'm not sure if we've won our welcome or not, but anyway, we've been honored to be here. And last session, this is our 10th session, and the last session we left with Jim's experiences in 1944 of enlisting in the service and his basic training and all the events that went before that, and then his very rapid movement into the war theater in the German area, Rhine area, and his wounded and being captured, and the ordeal of going on an arduous and almost unthinkable journey to Hammelburg, German concentration camp. So that's where we want to begin today, and I'm going to ask Carrie to start with the question.
Okay.
All right, great. So we want to hear I want to hear more about Hammelburg, and I guess one place to start would be, what was your life like there? What
Well,
was your
let me describe. Start the description to you as saying that Hammelburg. Of course, Hammelburg was a city or a town. Adjacent to it or nearby, there was an old army post, and it was a pack artillery post. By that I mean it was artillery that the caissons were drawn by horses, and supplies and everything were done by packed animal. And so that meant that there was a whole bunch of stables around, and that was then turned into a prison camp, and it was pretty typical. There was a stable, if you could visualize a long, narrow building on both sides, as my two hands are here, and they would be probably, say, 60 feet wide by maybe 150 or 200 feet long, and they would be put together like that. And there would be a common entrance between the two. The entrance here and go into this one, entrance here and go into that one. And and there were many of those around, and that was what they called them blocks, and that's where the prisoners were primarily housed. As far as I knew, I don't know how they did some of the other ones, because everybody was there. They had Russians there, they had French, they had British, thousands of each, and all I know is that all I ever saw was these stables that they had cobblestone floors, and they had bunks that were stacked four high, all down each wall. In the middle of each one of these things there was a it's kind of difficult for me to understand how it worked, but it was a furnace is what it was. But if you could just visualize a brick wall, and there was just solid brick, probably 3.5 or 4 feet wide, that would go about halfway across the narrow dimension. In other words, you could walk past it, and one side there'd be a very small opening, possibly like 1 by 2 opening, and it was they would build a fire in there, and of course I guess it was on for horses, and it just needed something probably to take the chill off, I would think. But what would happen is that they built a fire, and then what it would do would heat all those bricks. And once they got those bricks hot, then it was just a question of trying to keep it that way. And I mean, I can't say that we were ever really frozen to death inside the stables. It was still pretty cold, but it was alright inside there. That's the way the thing was laid out. It was rolling. It was way splattered all the way out. I would think probably maybe 300 or 400 acres. Rolling terrain, and dotted with all kinds of buildings. These stables were big things. There were service buildings, barns, and places that were kitchens, and that's where we were taken. Each one of these blocks or stables were, each one was surrounded by a high fence, wire fence, probably, I think they said it was like 17 feet tall, a wire fence. Just a little sidelight, there were some things that you could get by with when breaking the so-called rules, and there was other things that you couldn't. And one of the things that would get you killed was inside the fence, about 6 feet from the fence, on the inside of it, there was just a little line, a string. That's all it was. It was just a cord that got this high off the ground, stretched on little stakes that were there, and they had little pieces of rag hanging on them so that you knew where they were. And for some reason, being on the other side of that was verboten, so to speak. And it's one thing that they would shoot you. They would shoot you if you walked over that, stepped over that line. There were other things. Being outside of the stable or block, being outside during an air raid would also be pretty bad circumstances. I mean, they'd probably take a shot at you for that if you were doing that. Those are the main couple of things. Other than that, there were a lot of little things that you possibly could, get reprimanded for, maybe knocked around for, or something like that. But those are the two things that I know that they'd kill you over. They'd kill you over, those two things. And so that was the general layout of the camp. It was segregated by what they called private soldiers, and that would be, in our thing, it would be up to a corporal. They didn't recognize a corporal as a non-commissioned officer. So it was privates, PFCs, and corporals were in one section, and then what they called non-commissioned officers, which would be sergeants, all the different grades of sergeants, would be in another section, and then there would be officers in another section. Now, I don't know whether they segregated the officers or not, to junior officers, field officers, and general officers or not, but that's the way the thing was. I also don't know how they did the political people and the other foreigners, the British and French, and I don't know how they did them, because they were just far enough away that we were just didn't see them. From a standpoint, your living conditions were, a little rugged, but it wasn't anything that was going to put you in, a great amount of everyday pain, or it was just, sometimes it was uncomfortable. Most of the time it was inconvenient, but it really wasn't all that bad. First thing that enters anybody's mind, or the thing that's on your mind all the time, was food. And they would come by with loaves of the doggonest bread you ever saw in your life. It was about the size of one of our normal loaves of bread. About like so. It wasn't, but about like so, about the same shape. There was always a date that was, we assumed it was a date, was baked into the top of it, and it wasn't at all unusual for that bread to be 2 or 3 years old. And you could see little grains in it and everything, which everybody said were that everybody said that it was sawdust. What it was, I don't know. All I know is that was that was the staple. And you got yourselves into groups, and you get a loaf of bread, and the loaf of bread would be then divided between whatever the group was. Generally about 5 or 6 people is what it would amount to. You had to divide the loaf of bread. And that would be generally every day that you would get that. Sometimes when that would be the first thing you'd get in the morning. You'd end up with a piece of loaf of bread, maybe about the size of your fist little. And sometimes you'd serve you, they'd come in with it'd be in a kind of a saucepan and everything. You could take your tablespoon and get a spoonful of beet sugar. And of course it's very grainy. I mean, it's big grains of, it's pretty sweet and everything. And most everybody with the sugar, they'd get whatever they got and they'd just down it right away. But that would be a couple of times a week. And then one other time, usually early afternoon, you get your bowl of soup. And the soup was generally stocked pretty much with potatoes and some kind of maybe sausage or something, whatever they make soup out of. It was palatable. I mean, you could do some good with it. Hi, hon.
That for me?
Mary.
I'm in and out again. I'll be back.
All righty.
My copying machine's acting up.
What?
My copying machine's acting up.
Oh my heavens! All right. So, like I said, it was palatable, but every now and then they would bring in one that I have no idea what the ingredients were. It was the deepest colored green that you ever saw in your life, and there were like things in there like leaves of some kind. Maybe there was some spinach in there or something. I have no idea what was in there, but it was terrible. I mean, I really, as hungry as I got, I couldn't hardly eat it. And it was what they nicknamed the Green Hornet.
Okay.
Yeah, they got the Green Hornet. And some of the guys would eat it, and every now and then you'd have to just get something, but that's generally what. I mean, that was usually what you got. Now, from a standpoint of the Geneva Convention, you were supposed also to get once a week a Red Cross food parcel. Had you have gotten that, I mean, the life would have been so-called almost easy, because the food parcel was, particularly if you got one a week. And a food parcel would vary. There were Canadian parcels, there were French parcels, of course United States parcels. Those are the ones that everybody wanted. And I said Canadian, I think. And those three anyway. There might have been, maybe they might have had some Australian too, but those I remember. And they varied, of course, but like the American parcel would have a can. I don't know what the numbers of it would be, but it'd be a can about this high, like a big can of soup.
Yeah.
And it would have it would be full of what they called back in those days oleomargarine. And you couldn't do it, you couldn't hurt it. I mean,
Play baseball with it.
yeah, and those were, but it was very, very tasty and worked well. There'd be some, maybe some, be a couple of cans of some kind of processed meat, like Spam, or back in those days one was called Prim, and it was similar to Spam, and the one that everybody loved, of course, was a can of cheese, and it was just just an American cheese, but you're really good. And then of course there'd be things in there like there would be cigarettes in there, a soap. That's basically also powdered milk. There'd be powdered milk in there, and so you can understand if you got one of those every week. I mean, you're gonna be okay. Coupled with all the other junk you got, and you'd be fine. What it was that they didn't give you a hand. And they had it, but we just didn't get it. And I think while I was in there, I think we participated in 2 parcels, and when we got, they give out a parcel, and then you would have to be divided among, like, say 5 people. And and then it only happened twice, as I can remember. And so that's basically the way. Other than there was really nothing for us to do. We could not be forced to work. Non-coms couldn't. So the question is that you just formed your little groups and you discuss things. The number one thing that was discussed was, you might not believe this, you might think it might have been something else, but it was all food. It's just constantly about food. There'd be guys, we had a guy that was a commercial fisherman out of Mobile, Alabama, and he had all kinds of recipes and places to eat of seafood, and other guys were, I think the consensus were pancakes. Pancakes seemed to be on everybody. And of course, the guys from Chicago, there was a place near Union Station, this by the station that had this and that, and just constant. And I wish I could find, I got somewhere I got a notebook that I kept some things in it. It was terrible. And I know one of the notes I made was that all the time, no matter how old I got or everything, was always around the house there were going to be sliced up candy bars, Milky Way bars, and Babe Ruth bars, Butterfinger bars and everything, and each one of them with a supply of butter to put on top. And the thing was, first thing I want to do is I want to have a steak smothered in pork chops and surrounded with egg. That was the big deal. So basically, it was a question of that's where your life was. There were times you could go outside, and if there was no action or air raids, we never really got hit on the post itself. But the cities around us, Hammelburg and some of the places, they got sometimes get hit pretty hard. And when it did, I mean, you pretty much better get out of bed because it'd knock you out of there sooner or later if when it got really close. But you could. There was a very, very limited amount of reading material. Not very much of that at all. I know one time I organized just for something to do. And I think I had something like 15 guys. And we just did close order drill on the outside. And we were starting to have too much fun with that, and they finally broke it up. It was, we were putting all the fancy stuff that everybody could think of in there, And boredom was, one of the real big problems. So that's basically how things went. Dysentery and diarrhea was like given. I mean, that was just pretty much all the time. We did have cold running water that was in the area where the entrance was. There was nothing inside the block itself, but inside there was running water there. I never had a problem with it. Some of the guys did, and we were told not to drink it, but I mean, I didn't gorge myself on it or anything, but I didn't really have any problem with it, not any more than anything else. And thing with me is when for the first month I didn't have any way of shaving, and I had a beard pretty almost about like yours. And it was red as fire, and my hair was brown. You know, it wasn't any, I never had any, but my beard was red. And of course, you know, we had it all over. You couldn't get it off at all, and oh, it was uncomfortable, boy, itchy and everything. And when you got a hold of, you know, if you got a package, then there would be some razor blades in there, razors in there. And of course, the razor blades, you know, you had all kinds of ways of sharpening them on a piece of glass, or you know, on the side of your boot, or any other kind of thing to keep them sharp. And so it became, you know, pretty much, everybody's pretty shaggy. To be frank about it. We had a couple of chaplains that came in, and we generally had there were church services on Sunday most of the time. I became real close friends with a Lutheran guy, and I'm trying to think of what it was that it was, some kind of thing. I don't know what it wasn't singing, but because it wasn't all that much about it. But I can remember that we always managed to get in a 30-minute bull section whenever he came in on Sunday and everything. There was a priest from New York, Father Madden, and he was, you know, one of those typical mix from New York. And so if you stayed in line and didn't do anything you weren't supposed to do, it would be boring, but you at least stayed physically well. I think I mentioned before, I took a couple of pretty good beatings. Most of it, my own fault. And I think I said I lost 4 teeth as a result of a nice German rifle butt. The second time was then you get shoved around a little bit. That was something that could happen. Most of the at least a couple of times a week you get knocked, shoved around. But I mean physically hit hard. Well, it happened to me only twice. And the other was when I would refuse to dig a gun emplacement, and that was right on the Hammelburg. I mean on the raid the day before the raid, and I got hit really hard in the groin, and I'll never forget that one. And so that's basically the way things were. I'm trying to think if there's any. I'd like to relate one little incident to you because it's so funny. Some of the guards were almost comic book characters. I mean, most of them were pretty aloof and generally a little older. They weren't line troops. But there was one guy, was a little corporal, and he was a little guy, and always hollering and raising Cain and pushing people around. And he had a little pistol, a little bitty pistol, and he'd always end up, instead of being on his hip or whatever, he'd always end up around his back. And he loved to pull that pistol out, and he threatened everybody with that pistol. And it got almost to a point where the first couple of times, it bothered you a little bit, but after a time or two, it was just funny, And one night, late at night, after midnight, and inside this block, right inside the main door, my bunk was the third one. And I was only inside the door by about maybe 15 to 20 feet. And I was in the third one. and there was an air raid, and one of the guys was standing outside in the doorway, and the air raid was going on here. Anyway, what happened was this little corporal got walking down there, and the little guy was standing there. They were at right angles to one another. He was coming this way, and the guy was standing here. And he didn't hear him or anything like that coming and everything. Anyway, the guy let go a big oyster, you know, and hit the little corporal coming along, you know. And he started screaming and hollering. And here come the guy. He run off and run back into our block seat. And here comes the little corporal, and he got his pistol in his hand. He's going to shoot somebody for spitting on him. And he comes running in there, and of course they wore hobnails in their shoes. They had hobnails on their boots. And he comes running in there with that pistol and everything, and hits those damn floors. And you wouldn't believe the brody he took. I mean, you know. And I'm laying there on my stomach like this, and he had it right in front. And I bust out laughing. I couldn't stop laughing for anything in the world. And he's screaming and hollering and everything. And Troy, he runs over. He took the pistol, and he put it right on the tip of my nose. He just pushed as hard as he could right on the tip of my nose. And I still couldn't stop laughing. And he eventually went off of that and made a turn and fell down again on the way out. And by this time, the whole thing is just, you know, roaring. And he put that thing so hard on the tip of my nose, I had a black mark on the tip of my nose. I don't know when it was I got rid of it, because I had it for so long. But the only reason I mention it is it's just that it didn't take much to entertain you, you know what I'm saying? So that was basically the way it was. I'm not saying it was easy or anything like that, but when I saw what they did to the other, you know, to the other ones, then it was a walk in the park, because the Jews and the Serbs, some of the Serbs and the political prisoners. Whoa! I really didn't see any of them in the post there. After I got out, and so that was basically the way it happened, or way it was there.
Jim, tie down a couple of dates here now. When did you arrive there, and when did the raid happen?
I was hit on the 6th of January, and then I was in a hospital for several days. And I can't remember how long I was in the hospital. It's just a little fuzzy to me, because it was after the interrogation and everything. That was rugged. And then I think probably with 3 or 4 days in the hospital. That would have been like the 9th or 10th of January, and then we were 6 days. It was about the middle of January when we arrived up there.
Okay.
When I arrived in the middle of January, and it was pretty cold, and then the raid actually took place on the 27th of March.
Okay.
So there's a couple of months in there.
10 weeks probably. About 10 weeks, something like that maybe.
Okay, well, rumors always would fly around. You know, everything, there's all kinds of rumors that you heard all the time. I mean, you back in January, you know, they're ready for the push right now. The war will be ended next week. You know, that kind of thing was going on all the time. And things just kind of quieted down. They must have had some idea that something was going to take place, because that's when they ran us out there and told us that we were going to be picking up wood for our prison hospital. for the stoves. And when we got there, they had us to dig gun emplacements. And that was the day before. That was like on the 26th, real late in the afternoon. The next day, on the 27th, and for the life of me, I don't think I can pin down the time. I think it was fairly early in the morning. But the next thing you know, there's all kinds of racket, there's fire, there's gunfire. The place started filling up with tanks. You're standing up there and looking out a little window like this, and you see one direction, like so. And you can see on the road, and they were kind of up a hill, and up on the hill up there, the tanks were just knocking everything down. They were knocking down haystacks, they were knocking down service buildings, they were knocking down everything. And the whole thing didn't really last very long. You got to give me a little slack here, because I can't exactly remember really. I couldn't pin it down that it took place at 9:30, and it was at this time it was down 10:30 or something. I just can't remember that, or can't put it together anyway. But they came in and they actually captured and took that camp in a matter of, I would say, a matter of minutes. I mean, probably no more than less than an hour. And I mean, when I say they took it, the guard company, all the troops, the German troops were gone. I mean, I don't know where they went, I don't know how they got there or anything, but they were gone. The guard companies and everything. There we stood. With the tanks, they started knocking down all the wire. They knocking down wire and everything. And there we standing there with thousands of guys standing around. Nobody knew what to do. And I told you the incident about the tanker that was in front of our place. Mm-hmm. I jumped up on the back of the tank and was going to try. I figured we're being liberated. Mm-hmm. I mean, here's the front right here, and I said I'll get myself a nice ride to someplace. And I was going to ask him, ask to ride. And he came up when he came out of the hatch opened, and he came up out of there. And he was covered with blood, and I don't know that he was actually hurt, but he was covered with blood. In the tank, he had one dead in the tank, and another guy was banged up pretty good. And the first thing he had him was a box of K rations, and he said, "You want some K rations?" Well, under normal circumstances, I would have, but one guy said, "I'd like to get a ride," and he said, "Yeah, can you work the gun?" 50 caliber mounted on the outside of the tank. "Yeah, I can work the gun." And he started handing up buckets, and it dawned on me then, what in the world is happening here? Yeah. And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "We had to fight to get in here, and we're going to have to fight to get out." And that's when I asked him how far the lines were. And it wasn't unusual for tankers on patrols or on something to scoot in behind the lines a couple miles. Where they'd run in and maybe hit something and run back out and things like that. But he said, and so I said, well, if it's a couple of miles, we can catch a ride here, get back to the lines. And he said, we had to fight to get in, had to fight to get out. How far are the lines? He said 50 miles. And I mean, it was, we haven't been liberated at all, it dawned on it. They came in and took everything away, and he said there was going to be a fight going back. I wasn't about to ride the back of a tank, for 50 miles, and as it happened, there was where the blunder came in, because they weren't able to follow their plan. They had a inbound route that they were going to hit, and then a different route going back. And that one was blocked off for some reason or other. They had to go back the same way they came, and they were obliterated. They lost the whole task force. I don't know, it might have been some of them got away, but basically they lost 45 or 50 tanks and a dozen half tracks and some support trucks and stuff like that, and they just lost them. And so after knocking some wire down and, you know, mopping up and little things like that, they took off. And of course, I don't know how it happened, except what I've been able to read. And they must have had a pretty rough go. Well, they did. I mean, they lost everything. And so this, like I said, this is in the afternoon of 27th of March, 45, and here we are standing with thousands of guys standing around. Nobody knew what to do or nobody telling you anything. And like a dumbbell, me and another guy, we just started walking. And so I don't know if I told you that.
Go ahead with that. Was that Smitty? Was that
Yeah,
Smitty?
Smitty, yeah.
Okay, yeah, go ahead with that.
Waldo Smith. Well, we knew that across the street over there was a building that was an old theater. They sold films in there. And we knew that they were storing Red Cross food over there. So we went over there, ran into a German and got rid of him and made packs out of our overcoats and walked off. And wasn't anything glamorous about it or, you know, anything at all. We just walked away. And we were not gone very long when we were, actually what we were watching was we saw one of those German jets that Henkel 242 jet that they came out with. We saw one of them fly over and we didn't know what it was. Because we couldn't, it took us so long to find it. And we could hear the noise and we'd be looking up here for the noise, and of course the jet would already be there. And nowadays you know how to do that. You do it automatically, but then we were always behind it. And we got a glimpse of that thing going over. And then we saw a couple of P-51s. And they were doing some kind of funny maneuvers, and we couldn't figure it out. And one of them kind of headed out of the way, and the other one just almost stood on his nose and took up for altitude. And about in a few minutes, here comes a German Stuka. Now, the Stuka was that ugly gull wing thing that they had that they used for dive bombing early in even Spain and early in the war. And it wouldn't go very fast. I mean, it wouldn't run, I mean, on a straight flight, it probably wouldn't run 180 miles an hour. And ugly, and it was coming along. And that P-51 was waiting for him. And we sit there right in front of us. I mean, well, you know. And that P-51 comes up out of the clouds and knocked that plane down. I'll bet you he didn't use 10 rounds. I mean, went, and that all was to it. Down he goes. And while we're down there rooting, you know, and everything. And that's when we drew the guards from this group of, this bunch of political prisoners, the Stripes, that caught us. And they didn't know what to do with us. I don't know why they didn't shoot us. And they took us to join that group. And when we got there, we saw they were emaciated. They were missing fingers, ears, hands, arms. Just complete. Oh, it was awful. And and here and starved to death. Oh man, you couldn't believe it. I mean, by this time I had lost about 60 pounds, but I looked pretty good. I mean, compared to these guys. I mean, they were, you just can't believe it. I mean, they'd have a sleeve go up, or you wouldn't even see anything. There would be no meat around their arm at all. Just skin over a bone. And if they had an arm. And here we come. There's about 300 of them. And here we come with all this food. And it was obvious that we were going to have to give up our food, or we knew they'd take it away from us, probably kill us. And so that's when we decided to take off again. And
Jim, were they on the road?
yeah, on the road
They
walking.
were on
yeah.
the road. My
Yeah,
goodness.
they were just walking on.
Any idea
I
where
don't know where they were taking them,
Yeah.
but at that time they were taking people just like we got put with a column that had come. They had walked them all the way down from Poland, and there were just dozens and dozens of these columns of troops that were being. I don't know why they just didn't let them get liberated, but they were trying to keep them out of the way of the Russians mostly, because the Russians were coming in hard from the east, and so they were. The group of officers that we ran into were coming. That's where they were being taken from. And anyway, we got away and a little drew some fire, and I thought Smitty got hurt, but he didn't. They hit into his backpack of food, and we were free again for 2 or 3 more days, but trying to travel at night and hide in the daytime, and we just couldn't find her. It was overcast all the time. We couldn't find any landmarks, and we were lost all the time. And then that's when we, made the infamous, trip into that big spring house or something, and we got into there, and I was just going to kick a hole in them and, run them out on the ground, but. Smitty got to fooling around with it and got one of them dripping a little bit. And of course, we got into it. No, God, it's awful to get that smashed. We got all full of that snops or whatever it was, and when we finally could move, which was about 24 hours later. 24 hours we couldn't move, and when we finally could move, we just took off down the road, broad daylight, and came to a town, and we captured that baby without firing a shot. The Burgermeister came out, and a bunch of people came out, and we gave them coffee and soap and some stuff like that, and they brought hot water out, and we had a great big thing there, and they invited us to kind of stay there, but dummy, I wanted to get a little closer, and we decided. They pointed out the next way to go, and the next town was about 4 or 5 miles away, and we started off for there, and when we got to there, we did the same thing down the middle of the town. I'm a Yankee Doodle, and this time there was nobody came out. Nobody came out of the houses. They were all buttoned up, no flags, nothing. And I turned around and started running, and next thing I know, the burp gun goes off, and I'm ordered out of I went in the ditch, and they ordered me out of the ditch. Smitty was, again, I thought they shot him all up, but he managed to not get it again. And we were captured again. And this time they took us, they were the remnants of a guard company that had marched all of these officers out of Poland up there. And we were the only 2 enlisted men that joined this column of 400 American officers. Already from junior grade officers through field grade through, we had 2 bird colonels. And it was everybody, we had to go through a couple hours of screening to make sure that we weren't, ringers in there or something, or Krauts or somebody. And that was kind of dumb, but anyway, we had to do it. And then once they did that, and they decided, then the commander, I remember he came, God, he was livid when he came back. What were you doing? What were you stupid are you doing? And we told him, well, we just walked away, and he said, well, again, give you a dressing down. And he says, as of right now, you're under direct military orders not to be doing any escaping again. And I said, they weren't escapes. I mean, we just walked away. And, but that didn't sit well with him either. He said, you just stay close, because I don't know whether he had intelligence or whether he had, what the score was or not, but that was all a plan. And then we joined this thing as the only 2 enlisted men there. And then the routine of that was that they had a big old truck, and we called it just the kitchen truck. And that truck had some personnel on it. And at dawn in the morning, that truck would take off and go 10 or 12 miles or 15 miles, something like that. Find a place that had barns and some shelter, commandeer some kind of food, and they'd make a ration of soup for everybody. And that particular soup was not really bad. I mean, it was basically potato stuff, but whatever they could gather around in these rural areas where we were, it really wasn't all that bad. And then that truck would leave, and then the column would start walking, and it'd take us probably till around noon to get wherever we were going to get, and they'd already been set up. So then you got there, you got your ration of soup. Sometimes you got some of that bread again, sometimes, and that was it. But actually, it was the best stuff that we'd gotten while we were prisoners, and that was in the latter part of, well, by the end, down around the 1st of April by now, and so we spent the rest of the time, all the whole month of April, doing that. Every day, get up, walk 10 or 12, 15 miles, and get billeted in barns, usually in barns in small hamlets, small towns. A lot of times it'd be a road like that with some stores and maybe a few houses all on either side of the road. Across the outside back perimeter would be the farm where they would be farming, and that'd be all there was to it. But they'd have some barns and they always had some shelter for us somewhere.
Did you know where you were?
But yeah, we knew where we were because we could see road signs and everything like that. It's an interesting question you asked, because after a couple of weeks of this, we kept seeing these road signs, and we found out that there was a pretty good sized town called Moosburg, and we'd see a road sign and say Moosburg, 17 kilometers, and we walk all day long, and if we saw another sign, it might say Moosburg, 13 kilometers. And the next day we might see Moosburg again, and we'd see that all along. We were walking in a big circle right around Moosburg. It's the craziest thing in the world. Then, right towards the end, when we were in a couple of pretty bad places. We were in a town called Regensburg. Regensburg was a big hotbed of the early part of the Nazi Party, Regensburg, and we were in Regensburg in the middle of April, and anyway, it was Hitler's birthday. Now, we better find out whenever Hitler's birthday was, sometime in the middle of April. I think the Allies had every airplane in the world. I mean, I think they must have had Piper Cubs and everything flying, because just all day long, just the sky was black with airplanes. And Regensburg was, what there was left of it was just, I mean, just taken right out. And I can remember Easter Sunday, and I don't know when it was, but Easter Sunday was a very, very calm day, and that's when Father Kavanaugh asked to say Mass, and they gave him permission to say Mass if he would say a second one for their people. they wouldn't let us go together, but for their people. And then after that, we got mass every day. And each one of those towns that have those little chapels, and of course he had his own kit and everything. He didn't have to occasionally he got some help, but most of the time, he said mass every day. And we always have a couple of civilians that would slip in there. And then we had a bad time in Regensburg, and we had a terrible time in Nuremberg. I mean, we lost a whole bunch. Well, we lost about 8 people. Not all of them were dead, not killed, but we had 8 casualties. The German guard company that we had was almost obliterated in the bombing raid. There was about 100 of them to start with, and in Regensburg and in Nuremberg, they lost over 2/3 of them. And I myself saw in Nuremberg a whole bunch of them jumped into a big crater, and I saw a bomb go right in that crater. And then after that, the only problems we had were getting strafed by our own Air Force. If we got out into the open, we got that 2 or 3 times, and basically we didn't get anybody hurt by the fire. They were kind of hurting themselves, running and falling in the ditches and running into trees and breaking their arms and and things like that. And until I think I told you about the 2 P-47s that came up, flipped over, they caught us in a wide open on a place just like a pool table and threw out a bunch of leaflets. And that's where they explained that they realized who all these people were walking on the roads down there, and that didn't have to worry about it anymore. So anytime you saw a low-flying aircraft after that, they generally would wiggle their wings at you, and everybody knew it was over then. So the last few days of the war, we were getting just gobs of Red Cross food by this time. The Red Cross representatives were crisscrossing all through Bavaria down there, and they'd find a column, and they'd go in and check them out. If they needed some food, then here come a truck with a load of Red Cross parcels on it. And of course, how it happened, the Germans started understanding how it was going on, and they started telling you, here they comes, hide your food, and they hide the food. No, we don't have any food, and here come another load of food for you. And right there, probably towards the end of April, there's one time where they just said, we can't walk anymore, we just got to stay here. Everybody had so much food they couldn't carry it. So, and of course some of the parties were starting to start already too by that time. Then on the 14th of, on the 2nd of May, the 14th Armored came in and we were liberated. Didn't fire a shot. Although down in the city itself, there must have been a pretty good fight going on, because we heard the bridge blow, and that's in the book it told that there was a pretty heavy fight down there. And so that just about landed all up. The adventure wasn't over yet. When we were liberated there at this little town called Gars, it was designated an international hospital zone at the time, and I had, anyway, by that time I'd already gotten running and starting to do a little looting on my own, and that's when I found out that it was, or so they said, it was a international hospital zone, because all the stuff I had, including about 19 pieces of big old ugly sterling silver that had AH engraved on it. Anyway, I got it all taken away from me. And So that was right there the day of liberation. And then they finally got us to Moosburg. And when we got to Moosburg, they just, here you are, so long. We were still on our own. We had no outfit, we had no records, we had nothing. And we had no place to go to eat or anything. And I know we were billeted in that cheese factory, you remember?
Yeah.
In the book?
Yeah.
That's when it was, I couldn't quite figure, the parallel was so, and this cheese factory, and it was, airplane parts, and found a dry place to, to sleep, and, but we had to still had to find food. So, we found Smitty found a kind of a garage, and in that garage is just loaded with potatoes. And most of them were okay, some of them were not very good, and so we kind of lived on potatoes for the better part of a week. And we finally, this is when we finally got into some groups, and were flown to Reims, France. We were flown to Reims, and incidentally, one of the places where we flown from was Stuttgart, and we witnessed this doggonest thing you ever want to see. A German, two German ME-109s buzzed the place. And everybody diving, of course, for something or another. We're sitting on cold concrete. I mean, nothing like concrete for miles. And and here they come right over the field like this, peeled off and came back around and landed, and went through a surrender ceremony. Yeah. These two officers had these two airplanes, and they were all dressed fit to kill. You wouldn't believe it. And they went through all these processes, and some first lieutenant there didn't know what was going on. Anyway, we saw that, and then they flew us to Reims, and this was the first time we started getting some semblance of order. We got to Reims, and the order, nobody told you what to do, you just had to kind of find us out. Before you could do anything or anything happened to you, you had to get rid of your clothes and get new clothes and get a shower. And you went up into the shower, you took off all your clothes, just stripped all the way down, threw them in a pile, and they were burning them. And then you had to get a shower. When you got the shower, then at the other end you got new clothes. Such, just what you needed. And the only bad thing about this is that the line going into the shower was, can't hardly believe it. The guys are in there for hours and hours. And we decided that wasn't the way to go. And so the shower building was right here. It had some open area and some woods about 50 yards away from it. And so what we did was we had to get down and crawl, but we got into those woods and got all of our clothes off and managed to kind of ease ourselves into that line right up here close by, and got a shower, and that was at nighttime. Before that, we watched a movie, watched Meet Me in St. Louis, and it hadn't been released yet, not into the commercial, in the pipeline. Nobody had ever seen it. We saw it before anybody did. And so, after that, we had a regular GI meal, and then we took the route through. When it got dark, we took the route through the woods, and I think possibly there was a few guys that spotted us when we were coming out of there, but Smitty always had he always had somebody he could talk his way out of a, you know, man, you want me to be, I'm sick, man. You want me to be sick right here in front of you, and you know, that kind of stuff. And we got in, got a shower, got in the clothes. Then we had to make another flight. And from Reims, we were flown to Le Havre.
Hold right there.